XRP is the tax-free ledger. Now, I'm not talking about capital gains tax and the potential of that actually being eliminated for US-based cryptos. I know we're very excited about that, but I wanted to take this back to the basics with a quick, short video explaining how the XRP ledger has removed all middlemen when you go to use this ledger. It is completely open source, permissionless, and there are no middlemen. There is a very minute and small transaction fee that's an anti-spam measure to make sure that nobody just floods the ledger with a bunch of nonsense transactions. That is it. It is a fraction of a penny to send a transaction across the XRP ledger. And when you look at all the other functions on our ledger, it's that same transaction cost. It's so small, you don't even notice it. So back to the basics with this video. XRP is the tax-free ledger, and what inspired me to have this video and conversation with you guys goes back to this little thread with Matthew Sigel, who is a recovering CFA. He's head of digital assets research at Van Eck. Now, before we get into this, I just want you guys to take note of how early you are. For some of you guys, this will be elementary. You already understand this about the XRP ledger. But we're talking about head of digital asset research at Van Eck, one of the biggest institutions in TradFi that does not understand the XRP ledger. So if you still thought that you weren't early, you absolutely are, and this is why it's such a great opportunity. Matthew says, "Dear XRP Maxis, I may never understand what your blockchain actually does, but I'll always respect the passion required to pretend it does something. So keep hustling. We should also know how much money they are leaving on the table by not having their XRP ETF filed and live, like Canary, Bitwise, and some 5 or 6 other issuers, on top of dozens more XRP ETFs and all the money that those Wall Street players are going to make. Whoever is watching this from Van Eck, some adjustments might need to be made, unless you guys just want to leave the money on the table. I don't think that you do." Now, somebody responds to Matthew, and they explain some of the, BlackRock working with Ripple to tokenize U.S. Treasuries on the XRP ledger, some of the other things that are being done. And Matthew says, "Cool initiative, but does any of this actually accrue value to the XRP token holders? I'm not aware of any fee capture, revenue share, burn, or economic linkage. I think maybe I'm not smart enough to understand, but I'll keep trying to learn and update my views." So at least he's being open-minded. We'll give him credit on that one. But this shows you the mindset of these guys from TradFi. They think that, there needs to be some sort of cash flow or business model that pays back ecosystem participants. And this is where XRP and the XRP ledger distinguishes itself from almost every other blockchain, whether that be proof of work Bitcoin or proof of stake Ethereum and Solana, which is taxing you the entire time. So David Schwartz chimes in, "You asked what the blockchain actually did. You got an answer. Your response was that you couldn't get passive income from it. Is the blockchain ethos no middleman, be your own bank? Or is it, if I can't tax other people for passive profit, I don't care about it?" Now, shout out to Abs. He drops the mic drop here, Obama. I like that. That's a good note. Well, Matthew decides to retweet, and he says, "So if XRP holders aren't earning anything from the ecosystem and the protocol doesn't accrue value, who's the one collecting the tax?" David responds, "There really is no tax. You can use XRP to issue assets, trade them, issue NFTs, make payments, and so on. The closest thing to a tax is the transaction fees and reserves that serve as an anti-spam measure." Now remember, that has been drastically reduced. It used to be 20 XRP to open up a wallet, then it was dropped down to 10, and now it's 1. And it costs 0.2 XRP to open up a trust line. Say if you wanted to buy a stablecoin like RLUSD on the XRP ledger, it'll lock up 0.2 XRP to create that trust line. Once again, these are all anti-spam measures on the XRP ledger. The transaction fee of 12 drops per transaction, which equates to a small fraction of a penny, the trust line fees, etc. The ledger is a public good that belongs to everyone. Nobody has any special right to charge you for it. It is in no sense owned or controlled by XRP holders. Holding XRP gives you XRP, full stop. Think of it like Bitcoin, And this is where I've been calling it XRP is the better Bitcoin. We do have that merch available for you guys at zachrector.com. Go to the merch tab. I like that shirt, XRP the better Bitcoin, because it really gets the point across for folks who come from understanding Bitcoin and maybe they understand proof of stake, Ethereum, Solana. But think of XRP like Bitcoin that somehow magically works without needing transaction fees to pay for its energy requirements, and that also supports additional features like stablecoins, ADEX, NFTs, and so on. And so this is why I titled this video, XRP the Tax Free Ledger. So we can take this back to the basics for new folks to understand the difference between proof of work, proof of stake, which are both economic models that incentivize concentration, really, of proof of work, the mining and hash rate, but then also proof of stake. And so some of these networks, although they might seem decentralized on the surface, when you actually dig into a few large mining pools controlling most of the Bitcoin mining, it's not so decentralized after all. When you look into Ethereum, Solana, and despite the proof of stake nature that would seem decentralized, what actually ends up happening is that more and more people are staking and hoarding more of Ethereum, Solana, or whatever the token may be, so that they can earn that revenue. And so it actually is a race to centralization by the richest entities and ecosystem participants. Completely the opposite. There is no incentive. And this is where the saying, the best incentive is no incentive. Now, some of the builders and developers in our ecosystem have had an issue with this because they want more smart contract style programmability, and they want an ability to earn revenue from, executing some of these transactions and features and trading and issuing of tokens on the XRP ledger. We already have seen examples of this, and this is why the XRP ledger is so perfectly positioned, is because the cost of doing business on the XRP ledger is nothing. There is no tax, there is no proof of stake or proof of mining where you need to pay a miner or a staker or a pool some sort of fee to use the ledger. The transaction fee on the XRP ledger is burned, which adds to XRP deflationary pressure. Although small and minute, over time, it's a variable that will be added into our equation on XRP supply. But we have to understand here that because the XRP ledger is so cheap, it actually makes it one of the easiest platforms and one of the best platforms for a business to build on, because they can tack on their fee and it can still be cheaper than all of the competition. That is a great advantage for any business or developer building on the XRP ledger. You can tack on your fee, and our ledger and your business, whatever that may be, is still going to be cheaper than the competition. And so this is where the XRP ledger is uniquely positioned as the tax-free ledger, completely open source, completely permissionless. It is the better Bitcoin, created by Bitcoin developers, and an improved version of Bitcoin that allows you to issue and trade stablecoins, NFTs, other real-world assets that are going to be tokenized on our ledger, utilizing the decentralized exchange that's built into the XRP ledger. It is the one-stop shop for tokenization and liquidity, and you're starting to see real institutions like BlackRock and others that are arriving on the XRP ledger. Although they might be being quiet about it, I think that we're starting to see that veil being lifted on all of the institutions, on top of all of the retail activity in builders and NFTs and even meme coins that have made it to the XRP ledger. And I want to give a shout out to the team at First Ledger. That was the platform that created kind of a meme, user interface for the XRP ledger DEX to issue meme coins or, tokens that maybe you're going to build some utility on, but most of them are meme coins. But that was a great example of builders who built a product on top of the XRP ledger, and they made it easy and simple for users to issue tokens and trade tokens on the XRP ledger. And First Ledger tacked on a 1% transaction fee. So to use their platform, every trade that you made, you paid 1%. But people like myself and others were willing to pay that fee because it was still so cheap and because they built a great product. That is why the XRP is just one example of how well positioned the XRP ledger is. That's a platform for trading memes, and they were able to make a little bit of money, incentivize their ecosystem, and really set the example of building a product on top of the XRP ledger that is actually a real business that generates some cash flow. And I think that you're going to see that expanded upon with real institutions tokenizing real world assets and other products on the XRP ledger, including stablecoins. And they're going to do so because this ledger is proven for over a decade, costs almost nothing to use, and it's going to be one of the best sources of liquidity in the world. So this is how and why XRP is a better version of Bitcoin. I believe it has distinguished itself away from Ethereum, Solana, and other proof of stake ecosystems as well. And the XRP ledger truly does stand amongst itself and is uniquely positioned to capture, when we talk about 10 to 30 trillion getting tokenized over the next few years. I've been saying that the XRP ledger is going to be getting a good piece of that pie because it's the best source of liquidity, because it's so cheap to use. It is not a problem. It is not holding back our ecosystem. It is not holding back our developers. I asked David Schwartz directly at Ripple Swell Conference, is the XRP ledger ready for institutional adoption? He gave me a pretty long-winded and thorough explanation, but the short answer is yes, absolutely. These institutions just want to be able to do simple functions, issue stablecoins, NFTs, and other real-world assets in tokenized form on the ledger. And the reason why they're going to choose the XRP ledger is because we're going to build out deep, open, public pools of liquidity that anybody can contribute to or take from. And that's the advantage of using a blockchain. And that's the advantage of the XRP ledger and our consensus mechanism versus proof of work and proof of stake. Now, if you appreciate this basic content, taking it back to the basics for new people, or even as a refresher for folks that have been in the community for a while, please make sure that you like this video. Help us out by sharing it out far and wide. And all of our community resources are available at zachrector.com. Thank you very much, and we will see you guys in the next one. God bless. I am your host, Zach Rector. I really appreciate all of the love and support. If you want to support the channel, just remember that you can start by smashing that thumbs up for me, sharing this content far and wide, and everything else is at my website.